The first thing you notice is the air. You shouldn't feel like this. Not underground. Not in a maintenance tunnel built for steam lines and electrical conduits. The air should be cold, still, metallic. But it isn't. It's warm, moving, breathing. You're standing in a narrow corridor beneath Capitol Hill, the concrete walls sweating with condensation, the pipes overhead ticking softly as they cool. The only light comes from a single bulb 20 feet behind you, humming with a low, uneven buzz. Ahead of you, the tunnel bends out of sight. You take a step. Your footfall echoes, sharp, clean, familiar. Then a second echo follows, not yours, a half beat behind. You stop, the echo stops. The tunnel goes quiet. The air shifts again, a warm current brushing past your arm, moving toward the bend in the corridor. There's no vent here, no open door, no reason for the air to move at all. You take another step, slower this time. The echo returns, still behind you, still matching your pace. At the bend, you see it. A metal door set into the concrete wall, heavy, industrial, the kind of door that should be cold to the touch. But when you reach out, the metal is warm. Not faintly or subtly, warm like someone was standing on the other side. You lean in, listening. At first, there's nothing. Just the hum of the bulb behind you. Then, a voice. Muffled, close, speaking from the other side of the door. You can't make out the words. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman. You can't tell if it's speaking to you or to something else. But you know one thing. This door isn't supposed to lead anywhere. The tunnel behind it was sealed decades ago. And yet, the voice keeps speaking. Capitol Hill has a history of tunnels, some mapped, some forgotten, some deliberately erased. But not everything underground stays buried. Tonight, we're going beneath the surface, into the passages that were never meant to be found, never meant to be heard, and never meant to be warm. Capitol Hill has always been a place built in layers. Streets stacked over older streets, buildings resting on the foundations of buildings that came before, basements that were never fully mapped, corridors that were sealed, then forgotten, then rediscovered by accident decades later. Long before any of that, the ridge was a natural high ground used by the Duwamish and other Coast Salish peoples, a place of movement, gathering, and lookout. The hill held water, held vantage, held memory. That's the first layer, the one that never really disappears no matter how much concrete the city pours on top of it. The second arrived with early Seattle. Capitol Hill grew fast, dense, and uneven. Houses went up before infrastructure did. Roads were carved into the ridge. Utilities were added in pieces. Steam lines, water mains, electrical conduits, each one requiring access tunnels beneath the surface. These weren't meant to be dramatic. They were practical, narrow, hot, built for workers, not wanderers. By the early 1900s, a network of steam tunnels ran beneath Broadway and the surrounding blocks. They connected boiler rooms, fed heat to schools and hospitals, and carried pipes through the bedrock. They were loud, cramped, and constantly shifting with temperatures. Workers described them as breathing long before any ghost stories were attached to the place. Then came Prohibition, and with it, a new layer. Capitol Hill was full of private clubs, soft drink parlors, and backroom bars that needed ways to move people and supplies without attracting attention. Some basements were connected by widened coal chutes, others by delivery corridors, a few by tunnels that were never officially documented. Most of these passages were small, crawl spaces really, but they created a sense of hidden movement beneath the neighborhood, a sense that the ground itself had seams. The most substantial tunnels came with Broadway High School, built in 1902. The school needed steam heat, storage, and maintenance access, so a series of corridors were constructed beneath the building. When the school closed and eventually became Seattle Central College, the tunnels remained. Some were sealed, some were repurposed, some were simply left alone. Security staff have talked about them for years. The long, echoing hallways beneath the old gym, the bricked over passage that supposedly once led toward the Egyptian theater, the storage rooms that still hold equipment from decades ago. These tunnels are real, documented, mapped, but the stories that came out of them don't always match the blueprints. Over time, the layers blurred. Steam tunnels connected to old basements, prohibition corridors intersected with utility shafts. Renovations sealed some spaces and accidentally opened others. Capitol Hill became a neighborhood with surface life and a subterranean one, a place where the past was never fully removed, only covered. And that's where the hauntings begin. Not with tragedy or violence, but with the simple fact that the city built a maze beneath itself, a maze of heat, pressure, sound, and forgotten pathways. A place where echoes don't always belong to the people making them. A place where air moves even when nothing else does. A place where sealed doors aren't always as sealed as they look. Capitol Hill buried a lot beneath its streets. But not everything underground stays quiet. The tunnels beneath Capitol Hill don't form a single clean network. They were built in pieces, decades apart, each one serving a different purpose. Some are wide enough to walk through comfortably, others are barely more than crawl spaces. A few are sealed so tightly that the concrete looks poured in a hurry, as if the city wanted to forget what was behind it. If you were to trace the layers beneath the neighborhood, the descent would begin near Broadway and Pine, one of the oldest and busiest intersections on the hill. Beneath the storefronts and restaurants, beneath the sidewalks and traffic, the first tunnels run parallel to the street. Narrow steam corridors built to carry heat from the old boiler plants. The walls are concrete, the ceilings low, the pipes overhead wrapped in aging insulation. The air here is warm, even in winter, and the sound carries farther than it should. Moving north, the tunnels shift beneath Seattle Central College. This is where the infrastructure becomes more complex. A mix of old boiler rooms, storage corridors, and maintenance shafts left over from the days when the building was Broadway High School. Some of these spaces are still in use. Others are locked behind metal doors that haven't been opened in years. The floor slopes gently downward in places, following the natural grade of the hill. And the air grows heavier the deeper you go. Farther east, beneath the Harvard Belmont area, the tunnels become older and less predictable. Some were built for utilities, others were carved out as access routes for early construction. A few appear on maps with no explanation at all, short, dead-end corridors that serve no clear purpose. These are the spaces that feel the most forgotten, the most untouched. Dust settles thickly on the floor. The walls are rougher, the concrete darker, the air cooler. Sound behaves strangely here, echoing in ways that don't match the shape of the space. South of here, closer to Pike and Pine, the Prohibition-era basements begin to overlap with utility tunnels. These aren't true tunnels in the architectural sense, more like widened crawl spaces, coal chutes, and delivery corridors that were repurposed over time. Some connect to old bars and clubs that no longer exist. Others lead to bricked-over doorways that were sealed when the city cracked down on underground movement. The air in these spaces is colder, stiller, and carries the faint smell of old wood and damp concrete. If you follow the conceptual map far enough, all these layers converge in one of the oldest sections beneath the hill. A long, narrow corridor that once connected multiple buildings that was sealed decades ago. The door at the end is heavy, industrial, and marked with a warning that has faded almost to nothing. The concrete around it is newer than the rest of the wall, poured in a different color, a different texture. It looks like a patch, a repair, or even a decision. And yet, people who work in the tunnels say the air still moves around the door. Warm air, breathing air, air that shouldn't be coming from anywhere at all. The tunnels beneath Capitol Hill aren't a maze you can walk. They're a maze you can sense, in the heat of the pipes, in the pressure of the air, in the way sound travels through concrete. A map of the unseen, stitched together by decades of construction, secrecy, and the quiet persistence of spaces the city tried to forget. The stories that come out of Capitol Hill tunnels don't follow a single pattern. They don't point to one spirit, one event, or one lingering presence. Instead, the structure of the tunnels themselves, fragmented layers overlapping, each haunting belongs to a different part of the underground, shaped by the space around it. These are the four most consistent reports. In the steam tunnels beneath Broadway, workers talk about a sound that follows them. Not loudly, not aggressively, just steadily, a soft, measured footfall that falls half a beat behind their own. Doesn't matter how fast they walk, it doesn't matter how often they stop. The pacing adjusts. Some describe it as a second set of footsteps. Others say it sounds more like someone shifting their weight as if deciding whether to follow. The strangest part isn't the sound itself. It's the way it stops. Not gradually, not fading, just gone. Like whatever was pacing decided to wait. People who've worked in the tunnels for years say the pacing isn't tied to any one corridor. It moves. It chooses. It follows the heat of the pipes and the rhythm of the workers, a presence that doesn't want attention, only proximity. A haunting of movement, a haunting of patience. Beneath Seattle Central College, there's a corridor that was sealed decades ago. The concrete patch is newer than the surrounding wall, poured in a different color, a different texture. It looks like a repair, but the shape of the doorway is still visible beneath the surface. Security staff have reported hearing a woman's voice coming from behind it. Not screaming, not crying, just speaking, softly, steadily, as if carrying on a conversation with someone who isn't there. The words are never clear. The tone is always calm. One guard said it sounded like someone reading aloud. Another said it reminded him of a teacher giving instructions to an empty room. The voice never responds when spoken to. It never changes volume. It never moves closer or farther away. It simply continues, muffled by concrete that shouldn't be transmitting sound at all. A haunting of routine, a haunting of someone who never left their post. The oldest section of the steam tunnels, the air behaves in ways that don't match the environment. Warm currents drift through cold corridors. Sudden pockets of stillness appear in places where the pipe should be radiating heat. Pressure shifts without warning, brushing past people like a body moving through a narrow space. Workers describe it as the tunnel's breathing. Not metaphorically, literally. A warm exhale, a cold inhale, a pulse of air that moves with intention rather than physics. Some say the pressure changes only happen when they're alone. Others say it happens when they're thinking about leaving. If The tunnels are reacting to the idea of someone stepping away. There's no machinery that explains it. No vents, no airflow systems, just the sense of something sharing the space. Something that moves without footsteps. Something that notices. A haunting of presence. A haunting of breath. In the farthest reaches of the old access corridors, the one that dead end into concrete patches and sealed doors, people report seeing a figure at the bend in the tunnel. Always at a distance, always still, always just far enough away that the details blur. It doesn't approach, it doesn't retreat, it doesn't react to light or sound. It simply stands at the edge of visibility as if waiting for someone to come closer. The figure is described the same way every time. Tall, unmoving, featureless, dark enough to absorb the light around it. Some workers say it looks like a person. Others say it looks like the absence of one. No one has ever seen it up close. No one has ever seen it disappear. It's just there one moment and gone the next, like the thought you can't quite hold on to. A haunting of stillness, a haunting of attention. Cities are built on layers, not just of history, but of intention. The things we celebrate, the things we hide, and the things we simply build over because it's easier than dealing with what's underneath. Capitol Hill is no different. Above ground, it's one of the busiest, brightest neighborhoods in Seattle. Music, restaurants, crowds, movement. But beneath all of that, there's a second version of the hill. A quieter one, a warmer one. A version shaped by steam lines, sealed corridors, and the leftover spaces the Seattle didn't know what to do with. The tunnels were never meant to be dramatic. They were never meant to be mysterious. They were built for heat, for storage, for access. But spaces don't always follow the intentions of the people who design them. Some places develop their own presence. A corridor that still carries footsteps long after the workers have gone home. A sealed doorway that shouldn't transmit sound but does. A pocket of warm air drifting through a cold tunnel like a breath. A shadow that waits at the bend, patient and unmoving. None of these hauntings feel violent. None feel chaotic. They feel like echoes, not of tragedy, but of routine. A kind of routine that repeat themselves long after the people who created them are gone. Maybe that's what makes the Capitol Hill tunnels feel different from other haunted places. They're not tied to a single story. They're not tied to the idea of repetition. The daily movements of workers, students, bootleggers, maintenance crews, and the countless people who pass through these places without ever thinking they'd be remembered. But the tunnels remember. They remember the heat of the pipes. They remember the rhythm of footsteps. They remember the voices that once filled the corridors. And they remember the spaces the city tried to seal away. When you step back onto the surface, into the noise, the lights, the movement of Capitol Hill, it's easy to forget what's beneath your feet. But the tunnels are still there, breathing in the dark, carrying echoes through concrete, holding on to the routines of a city that keeps building upward while the past settles quietly below. Some places haunt because of what happened. Others haunt because they were never meant to be empty. The Capitol Hill tunnels fall somewhere in between. A space the city buried, a space that never fully went silent, a space that remembers everything. The tunnels beneath Capitol Hill are tight, warm, and close. A world of echoes and pressure. A place where the past presses in from all sides. But Seattle has another kind of haunted space. One that isn't buried. One that isn't hidden. One that sits out in the open, exposed to the wind and the water and the long, empty stretches of sky. On the edge of Lake Washington, there's a place where the city's military history still lingers. Not underground, but across acres of concrete, abandoned buildings, and the remnants of a base that once trained pilots for war. Magdalen Park doesn't whisper, it doesn't breathe, it doesn't pace behind you in the dark. Its hauntings are different, colder, wider, shaped by open air and long sight lines and the echoes of a place built for discipline, not secrecy. Next time, we're headed to the old Naval Air Station, into the hangars, the barracks, the training grounds, and the forgotten corners where the wind carries stories farther than footsteps ever could. Until then, my name's Kevin. This has been Haunts of the Pacific Northwest. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the past doesn't always stay underground. Sometimes it stands right out in the open.